Hi everyone, welcome to Brothers, Sisters, Strangers. I'm Ali John Chaudhary, psychotherapist, and today we have a very special episode. I'm going to be talking about the continuing elements associated to the big five personality traits. And one of those particular personality traits is one of that many of us have experienced, and that's agreeableness. And I think that that's going to be a very interesting topic because today we're not only going to be talking about agreeableness, but also disagreeableness with regards to our siblings that most of us have experienced in our interactions. So I think this is going to be a very interesting episode for our viewers. Thank you so much for being here, Fern. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, I'm always happy to be with you. I'm Fern Schumer Chapman, author of Brothers, Sisters, Strangers, Sibling Estrangement, and the Road to Reconciliation. And I am very agreeable about agreeableness up to a point.
I like that. That's really good. I agree. How's that? So today's episode is going to be interesting because I think that a lot of times people ask us, well, what can we do in such situations? And we're going to be answering that in this whole process. We're going to be going into what is an agreeable person, what do they look like, how does it look with a difficult sibling in particular, and what does it mean with regards to a sibling relationship and what we can do in particular to that. So that's going to be today's episode. So I think it's going to be good to start us off with just what is an agreeable person in that way. I think that that's one of the first questions that comes up. And, people that are agreeable tend to score high on being empathic. And they'll typically put other people's needs first before their own. Because they favor cooperation, they'll generally be well-liked and considerate of others. And basically, they can also have that same shadow side in that what ends up happening is they may end up sacrificing their own needs in favor of others. So because of their helpful nature, they can very much think in the we perspective, and that can be good in professional settings, but in a personal life, that can be more difficult because you're always focused on others, and that can also affect us negatively if we have a difficult sibling.
Yes, it could be extremely exploitative if you have a difficult sibling or a toxic sibling because they know your good nature and your agreeableness and they take advantage of it.
Absolutely. And I think that that's something that's really important for our viewers to relate to because it's something that we've all gone through ourselves, these type of interactions with a difficult sibling. And I think that what that looks like oftentimes is it's often that they have that disagreeable trait in their personality, our difficult siblings. And they most likely see others as competitors, for example, towards the realization of their needs. And like narcissists, they'll consider other people as being somehow selfish and be less inclined to be helpful. I'm just thinking of my own sibling relationship where my sister would flat out refuse some of my requests that were very benign, very simple. And I'm thinking of a sign I once saw in a movie that they actually had a sign with a very, very small yes and a very, very big no. And I think that largely qualifies my sibling relationship in general.
And not only that, I think that because some of these siblings are particularly competitive, and there is a natural setup for competition among siblings. They look to, they're not that interested in you. They don't want to ask you questions. And while you coming at it with a big empathetic heart, they're pretty closed down and simply dismissive.
Absolutely. And I think that that's especially an important trait to remember because they can be making use of deception, they can be secretive, and they have no issues with making you look bad, bringing up your shortcomings, criticizing you unjustly, or being the type of person that will just be very harsh. And that's something that a disagreeable person will do because they won't attribute any importance to your feelings all that much. So, and we'll get to that too, because I think that's an issue But I think that they normally like to drive wedges also between others, namely our parents in some cases, and in other cases with extended family, like we hear about in some of the forums.
Well, and I want to say that they have a very narrow view of relationships. It's a zero-sum game. In other words, you know, it's you get the love or I get the love, but not both of us. And so that's where that driving wedges and appealing to parents or other siblings comes in. And it becomes a much more competitive arena rather than a loving experience.
I agree. And I think that that's the issue that can sometimes arise, is the sense that they make people choose sides and they don't know why. And I think that that's the thing that happens, is sometimes we're left with asking ourselves why. Why are they forcing people to choose sides? And we don't really know what's said either, not in a lot of cases. It's like people are just being dismissive or just basically not interacting as much with us because of maybe something they may have said and such. So I think that that's an issue onto itself that can be a driving factor for somebody that's disagreeable. And I also think that they tend to shut down conversations whenever you tend to bring stuff up like this, you know. So they may very much gaslight, as we've said before. So to an empathic person, that can be very crushing, because all of a sudden it's like you feel as if you didn't succeed in communicating with them. So you put the onus on yourself, when in fact it has more to do with their own general sense of distrust, right? And the empathic person almost feels the need to try harder, as if somehow the next time is going to be better, or they're going to get a different result. But in a lot of cases, you know, disagreeable people will be indifferent to your feelings, and you may largely never get the result that you hope for.
Well, I think this is where the risk comes in, because if you continue to try to improve the relationship and even people please, you are putting yourself at risk, because you become the narcissistic supplier, or you simply are not protecting yourself in these somewhat toxic situations. And you know, I think that's a dangerous path to take. And you even run the risk of becoming enabling. So you start to make excuses. Oh, well, he had a bad day, or, you know, it's allergy season and he's never feeling very good during allergy season, whatever it is. But I think once you start hearing yourself making these excuses for somebody, the balance in the relationship is starting to tip, and it's a dangerous tip.
I agree. I think that's something to very much be careful of, because that's a negative representation of somebody that can be agreeable. So there's all of these different types of shadow expressions, or unhealthy expressions, if you will, that can sometimes come up that need to be watched out for, or just kept in check. So I agree with you. And I think that kind of leads us into the next question, which is what does it mean with regards to sibling estrangement or sibling relationship, and what can we do? So number one is, I'd like to just suggest to our viewers that the failure is not on you. It's really important to recognize that, right? It's really on the other person and their inability or unwillingness to relate to you. So it's important to be careful here also, because being disagreeable is not always necessarily a bad thing. And I'm going to get to that very shortly. So I think at the same time, you know, it's important to keep things in a sibling estrangement context, and recognize that disagreeable people will often use, be the type of people that will try to get the upper hand on other people, and just in terms of power gains and things of that nature, as we've seen before. Now, if you're interacting with a disagreeable person, it's important just to stick with the facts, right? And when talking with them. So it doesn't mean to just shut down your emotions, but it means rather to allow them to see the side, allow them to not see, I should say, that side of you, because they won't relate to it anyways. So I would say in some ways to get them to agree on the most basic of things. So while they might not value peace as much as we do, we don't end up falling into the trap of wanting to be right, because if we start to do that, we're playing their game, right? And if we start to do that, then we start to take a bad turn for the worse. And I think that at the same time, if you don't agree on the most basic of things, then that's when you have to start to talk about an exit strategy for yourself and to start to think about that.
You know, I think that it's really difficult to find the line between agreeableness and being true and authentic to yourself and protecting yourself in these relationships. And I think that's almost been a lifelong journey for me. How do I state my needs and make sure I am not exploited? But how do I also be me and have my kind heart?
Absolutely.
I'm asking for a friend.
I think it's important that you be yourself, I think, and that really depends on the type of goals you set for yourself, right? So if your goal is to be your true self, then it can be to express yourself authentically during those interactions, even if that person is disagreeable. It really depends what your goals are. If your goals are to basically just, in some ways, have contact with a family member while they're there, then that becomes the focus. It can be something as simple as that, you know. And I think it's just important in some ways just to remember, you know, what your purpose is. So whenever you're going into a difficult situation, ask yourself what your purpose is. And oftentimes, if you become contextually disagreeable, that can also be helpful. And that's what I meant by disagreeableness being perhaps a good thing. It's the notion that if you can, if say situation A occurs, well, what is your reaction? If situation B occurs, what do you do? If situation C occurs, what's your move? So keeping a bit of an emergency preparedness planning in the back of your head is really important. So that way, if it manifests, then you know that you've already got something planned ahead to be able to deal with that contingency. So it's like martial arts, you know, it's knowing what to do is half the battle, right? So.
Yeah, you really need to know how to anticipate. And, you know, there's another piece of this is when you can anticipate, you can disengage a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's that third eye experience once again, where you're like, okay, I know what's coming here. I can deal with this and I'm going to protect myself.
Absolutely. And I think that that's very important what you say there, because again, to know that you're doing it temporarily, that you're there just for that fixed amount of time, if you pass each of these steps and you tap yourself on the shoulder saying, good job, you made it through this step, then you're reassuring yourself. So I think that just keeping those check marks, you know, going with that and just being able to say, okay, I did this, you know, even excusing yourself going to the washroom is another way of kind of disengaging, right? If we need to do that, sometimes people forget about that. You know, there's nothing wrong with just getting up, going to the washroom, you know, for your own reasons. You don't, you know, so I think that's another strategy to enable the third eye.
And entering these encounters with lowered expectations.
Yes, by all means. I think that that's very important not to have expectations, because when we do, it's because we want to be right. And we want to avoid that. We want to make sure that when you're going into a situation that you have a security blanket, and that security blanket can be that you have an exit strategy, that you're doing it temporarily, that you have no expectation towards the other individual, and that you're just keeping your eye on what your point is, what your purpose is. So I think that that's one of the most important things to remember is what is it you want to say, if there's anything to say to that particular sibling, or what is it you want to do. So when you do that, then you're really breaking it down to very simple steps. And if you get those done, then that's great, because that's the goal, without getting lost in the emotions, without getting lost in the situation. And I think at the same time, remembering that your difficult sibling has their own filter, right? Just like we have our own inner filter as well. And we're not responsible for how it filters into them. And I think that's important as agreeable people to remember. It's not up to us or how it goes through.
Yeah, I think it's particularly challenging with a sibling because you've got the history behind you and you have a tendency to lapse back into those earlier roles. So the key too is staying in your present adult self as you encounter these situations.
Absolutely. Staying connected with a healthy adult is key. And it's something that I think both of us have been recommending to our viewers for a long time, including in this particular video as well. So,
well, Ali Khan, I agree with you.
So I'm glad to hear that, Fern. That's wonderful. I agree with you too. So, so I think we're almost out of time. So I think that this has been a wonderful video that we've been able to talk about, and this is an important, timely input that we're bringing into this with regards to agreeableness and disagreeable siblings and such. So, I just wanted to mention before we end our video for today that we also have the Sibling Estrangement Support Group on Zoom that is offered once a month, and if people want to join, it's only $9.99, and they can, of course, just pay via PayPal for that, and they can meet people that are of like mind, going through the same thing. Very warm, compassionate group, empowering group, and I do think that this is a good resource for a number of people going through this. Yeah.
And we have a lot of other programming in the works, and so stay tuned, because we are dedicated to empowering those who are estranged from their siblings.
Thank you so much for doing this again, Fern. This is wonderful to have you here.
Thank you. It's always fun to do these little sessions, and I learn a lot. So until next time.
You bet. You take care, eh?
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.